Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Writers Drinking Whiskey, your literary happy hour, the show where even Texas admits everything is bigger. I'm your host, who's trying to get a little slimmer, William R. Hincy, and joining me today, I am honored to have Reavis Wortham with me. Reavis, welcome to the bar.
Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate the invitation, and I'm excited to be here.
Very good. And I wonder if anyone picks up on the fact now, if there's a pause right before I say the name, it's because I'm trying very hard to pronounce it right. I'm like, no, I know how to say this. Take a break, like that little pause, like your drama teacher taught you in high school, and just say it correctly. So I think you're nailed it this time.
You did. You nailed it just fine. And I, with a name like Reavis, it's always mispronounced anyway. I've grown accustomed to answering to Reavis, but you got it just right.
Very good. So let me give you kind of the 10-cent introduction here, and you can add anything I might have missed. But so you're a New York Times bestseller, 2-time Spur Award winner. You have, I think it's 3 series when I was looking at your website. You have the Red River Historical Mystery Series, Sunny Hawk Thriller Series, and is there also a Tucker Snow Thriller Series?
There is, and then there's a Cap Whitlatch series that just started this year, and it's an old-fashioned Western. And then I just signed a contract for a new series, a Western horror series, which is fun to do. And that one, right now we're calling it the Buck Dallas, but we don't know where it's going to go. It won't be out till 25, but that's 5. So I'm kind of busy.
Yes, you are indeed. And then besides that, and I think, and actually correct me on this too, because I think the most recent book as of recording is The Broken Truth. But that might change as far as if you have something coming out when we record. So is there anyone imminent here?
Yeah, I've written so many recently. I'll tell you, this year has been really productive for me. So I'll have a Western, a Cap Whitlatch Western coming out, and I think it's the only saloon in town that will be coming out within a few months. But that's pure old-fashioned Western, as I said. But yeah, it's coming out. But Broken Truth releases August 20 of this year, 2024.
Okay, very good. That's less than a month away as a recording. So that's exciting.
Yes.
And then besides that, you've also written, I think, over 1,000 columns. I think on the website, which I think it said 1,200. But I know it's funny. Every time I bring up people's websites, they're like, I need to update that, and then I think I need to update that. I'm never get around to doing it. But
I understand. Honestly, I have over 2,000 newspaper and magazine articles behind me since I started writing in 1988.
Oh, very good. And then the one I thought was the coolest when I was perusing the website here was that you've also had 4 fictional characters / kind of places named after you, at least 4 at this time of that. So I thought that was really neat.
That's kind of fun. Yeah. We got into this business, and I got into it in 2011, and I have had the opportunity to meet a lot of authors that I like to read before that. And some of us become friends, and some of very good friends. And so every now and then somebody will surprise me, or I will surprise somebody else by just throwing a name out there, creating a town or a character with a last name. You had John Gilstrap on not too long ago, and John threw me under the bus in one of his books, and so, and the late Tim Dorsey also used my name for one of his characters, which was an honor because Tim if you've never read Tim Dorsey's insane Florida novels, they are fun. And he added me in as a reporter for a little while for some of his last books. So that was a hoot.
That's very cool. Yeah, and John, and I'll have the future me put up the link here up in the corner. But I'll link John's episode to it because I always say the show's like 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, right? It's just like this person is just me, this person, this, and so on. So it's always fun to get those little linkages up. So John's will be actually releasing for the public here in like 2 days if I have my days right.
I'm looking forward to seeing that one. Yeah.
His is popping on, so that's going to be fun. So, so my favorite question of the show, and the one that inspired the entire show, what are we drinking?
Well, today I've gone back to my roots, and I've gone back to my roots in a lot of different ways. I just turned 70 years old a couple of months ago. And, I grew up in the 70s when a lot of people were doing a lot of other things other than drinking. I never waded into that world, but I came from a family of beer drinkers. My dad and his uncles, they drank beer and played dominoes. And so I drank the beer with them, and that's where I kind of cut my teeth. And that was Miller High Life. And that was what the old men drank, as I call them. They're younger than I am today, but that's what they drank at the time. And then I moved up to Coors and then tried all the craft beers, but I've gone back to Miller High Life, and I'm doing the same thing now with the whiskeys. I have tried them all. I see your shelves back there, and you have some of my favorites and some things that I've enjoyed over the years, and I was always about one step ahead of the trend in some ways. I discovered Pappy Van Winkle before everybody else did, and I have a couple of bottles stashed away, which I don't touch very often. They're special occasion. But I started out with my guys when I was younger, drinking just good old fashioned wild turkey. Whoop, there it is. And I've gotten back to wild turkey. I've drifted back to it, because it reminds me of when I was younger, and we've got a little Buffalo Trace here that
the Buffalo Trace is good stuff.
That's a good one, and I've shared quite a bit of this with some writer friends of mine. But today it's wild turkey on the rocks, maybe with a little splash of water on occasion. But I just love that old fashioned flavor, the one that brung me.
Exactly. Dance with the one that brung you here. And that's what I'm doing too. So almost all of these bottom shelf has been gifted over time. So where it's been places like we went to, and this is what I'm actually drinking today. It was my birthday this past week.
Oh, wow.
And so my wife and I went to this little speakeasy / distillery called, how well it shows, The Obscure.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So it's a pretty neat little place. They have artists on there, and you get to watch. They have the cameras. So you can watch as they draw things, and you can buy it. They tell you some stories, like make a drink. So and I think that is a rye. Yep, the Rights of Fall rye. So I was just drinking that, and I had it upon these wooden cups when we were at Renaissance Fair. And he actually didn't have them there, but I looked at his cups and was like, if you had a whiskey cup, I'd get one. He's like, we're making them. Send me your email address. So he sent me, I think it is, I'll link it because I told the gentleman I would do it, but it's a Mad Cup, I think it is.
Okay.
Cool. And so they make those by hand. So I got a couple of those. There's something fun about drinking, whiskey matured and, wood. And a wooden cup. So
you're going back old school, like so many of us like to do these days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So we're together on that. So awesome. So I love to find out, and I know I read it on your website, but for our audience here, so where in the world are you, and what's the best place to get a drink there?
Oh well, I am in Northeast Texas, north of about 30 miles north of Dallas. And, I don't have a favorite watering hole. A lot of places have little neighborhood water holes that they like to go to. And I don't have any specific place. We have a steakhouse here in town in Prosper, Texas. And in Frisco, Texas, I'm sorry. And it's an old house that they renovated and turned into a steakhouse. And one little corner over it is a nice old fashioned bar. And you're going to hear me say old fashioned a lot because I like I like throwback stuff. And as you and I were talking about before we came on here, my wife and I love mid-century, even though I'm a fifth generation Texan, and and I wear a hat, and I'm kind of the cowboy kind of guy. But this little place is kind of off in the corner, and it's dark as bars should be, and it's not loud as bars should be. And so we'll go to Randy's Steakhouse and kind of hide out in the corner over there for a little while. When John, and I'm going to talk about John quite a bit because he's one of my best friends, and he helped me get started in this business. When he's in town and we get together here, there's a little speakeasy here in town, like you're talking about, behind a bookcase. You kind of slip in there, and they have a smoked old fashioned that is really, really good. So we'll slip into there every now and then.
All right, very good, very good. I love the smoked old fashions too. I don't know how much like better they taste, but I just love watching the smoke and everything. I think that part is so much fun.
I think that as a collective consciousness from sitting around a campfire. I think our ancestors sat around a fire, and we have a place in the country, and I'm from the country, but we have a cabin up in Northeast Texas, almost up on the Red River, almost in Oklahoma. And we will build a campfire out there, and I'll sit out there and have a drink, and the smoke always makes the drink taste better. So I think it's something ancestral that we have, that we like that smoky flavor, and it just takes us back to back to the old folks, back to where we all came from.
Right. That's fun. It's such a human thing. I read an article not too long ago, but they were talking about this retirement home that they built in Florida, and the idea of it was they tried to make it as much like India as possible, because a lot of the people that come over from India, they wanted to retire there, and they were asking them like, why do you want to retire in a place that looks like India versus like going to India? And I know we want to be in the States, but it feels like home. We want to feel like home. So we want all of the state amenities, but we want to feel at home. I think so much of our lives, I think we were always looking for home in some way. Whatever made us as kids, whatever was good or bad, we may need to visit what happened to us in our younger years and come to terms with it. David Morrell, I don't know if you've had the opportunity to interview him. He's the guy that wrote First Blood, which became Rambo. And David helped spark my writing career in more than one way. And he and I have sat down and discussed that over drinks before in the past. And he says all writers have to write because we're all damaged in some way. But what we write about is what damaged us. And so in a different way, maybe not outright, but it's always a subtle thread through our works. And so I think that's what it is. I think we all go back home for whatever reason, whether it's for damage or for us just to relive those wonderful times that we had as kids, because I had a great childhood as a kid. And so I think that's what we do. I think we want to get back there and touch it in some way. And that's why a lot of folks want to move to the country. A lot of folks that I know were country people, and they moved to the city to make a living. But now that they've retired, they kind of they want to drift back out to where they came from. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I believe it. We're all, as writers, we're kind of artistic salmon. We're going back up straight there.
We are. That's absolutely true.
Yeah, so I feel that completely though. So I was born in Morgantown, West Virginia. So all my family's kind of like Western Pennsylvania, like the northern panhandle kind of area of West Virginia. But I didn't grow up there much. My dad was in the Air Force, kind of moved around. But my brother did. My older brother's 8 years older than me, and he had also spent some time living with my grandfather as a farm out. My grandfather's biggest regret in life was that his city, West Alexander, there's a stop sign he can stop at. And one side of that stop sign is West Virginia. The other side is Pennsylvania. And his farm and all the acreage is on the Pennsylvania side. And he had to pay higher taxes. And he's like, on the other side of that stop sign, I'd be so much better off. But my older brother always wants to, he's getting closer to retirement. He's not quite there, but he's like, he wants to retire back there, right? It's a real drive. But it's home in a sense, but it's not a place. I don't really feel like I have a home, to be honest, but,
right.
It's not, to me, it's not, I don't have that drive like, oh, I need to go back there. It's like, I like to go back because it's kind of my roots. I love to visit, but it's not I want to go back. So I can get the sentiment of this is where I started. I kind of want to get back there.
Well, we do. That's the reason we bought this land. We only bought it about 4 years ago. We had to sell family land a long time ago, and we couldn't buy it back because people that own it were not interested. But we bought this cabin up in Lamar County, not too far from where I grew up, where my granddad's farm was, just like you. And so in a sense, it's going back to our roots too. That's what we have. And we have grandchildren. I want them to get out, hunt, fish, and get a few ticks on them and run out and get scratch chiggers. Just have a good time like we did, because my goal is to get kids off of these devices and get them outside.
Right, right. Amen. Man. Good on you for that. I know I always think of that too. It's so nice to actually get out and get away from everything. So
Yes,
we try. We're suburbs, so I'll try to get my son. Like we got him he would start the chess club this year.
okay.
And
Good.
so I got him kind of a King Arthur little chessboard. It's not like super fancy enough we play. So I try to like every night we should need to turn everything off and just sit down and play, and maybe go in the back and hang out by the fire or swim, like whatever, just move away from the screens for 5 minutes.
And converse. That's kids.
Yeah.
I'm a retired educator. I was in education for 35 years. And I think kids need that contact. They need to talk to people. They need to roll their eyes at the things we say, and it'll come back to them later and they'll use it. But they need conversation and interaction, because we're drifting away. These young people are drifting away with these electronic devices, and they don't know how to deal with the world. They don't know how to cope. And you do that by learning. And then you do that by rolling your eyes at the old people. I have two daughters, and as they were growing up, they would be overwhelmed with whatever befell them in school. I have a term paper; it's 10 pages. Oh my God, I'll never be able to write 10 pages. And I told both of my daughters, I said, you know what? Here's how you do it. Do you know how to eat an elephant? And of course, the first time they didn't. They said, what? I said, well, you eat it one bite at a time, and you'll work your way through it. And then I use that over and over again with them through the years. Well, now they're both educators themselves. And my oldest daughter, she's a redheaded librarian. She said the other day I had to slap my hand over my mouth because one of the kids told me he was not going to be able to finish this insurmountable problem. And she goes, Dad, I looked at him and said, you know how to eat elephant? And then she goes, oh my God, I became you. But it works. Yeah. It stays in there and it helps them out at some point in their life.
Mm-hmm, right. Amen. Yeah. I think of that too, because our grandkids are very young, but we have a couple of grandkids and stuff now. But the older two daughters we have our grandkids, Juju and Ellie. And so their moms, they'll they'll call and have some problem, right? And I'll talk to them, and then they'll it's never like, thanks, Dad, or like, oh, that's a good point, right? But then I always 6 months later will kind of say something, like paraphrase it back to me. So I was like, how do you say it? I'm like, because I know it's there. Like, I just say it. Like, I have no, I don't ever need credit for it, whatever. But I'm like, they just say it and hope it percolates through at some point.
And it does. We don't realize the results right then. I promise you, we don't. You may not see immediate results, but you see results down the road. Here's a little story that you might be interested in. Again, like I said, I was an educator for 35 years. 10 of those in the classroom, and then I moved up into administration. But I had one student in class, and he was what we call a warhorse. He had no interest in education. He had no interest in people above his age. He was an outlaw. I figured he was going to go to prison. I mean, honest, and I had him as an 8th grader. So I thought this kid's destined. And he broke into the school one night, destroyed the school while he was there. And the assistant principal and I were and still are good friends. We started out together, and he and I worked on this kid. And I mean, we worked on him hard, and we were hard on him. And he was just, like I said, he was a wall hoss. He did not want to do anything. And we squared off more than once and dealt with him just as stern as we could. We tried to get him to understand. We understood. We're here for you, bud. But anyway, he went off to high school. Didn't see him again. And decades passed. My wife and I, we love to go dance. We went to Billy Bob's Dance Hall in Fort Worth. We go there 2 or 3 times a year. And I put my hat on. We go out there. We have a great time. Well, over the years, after I started writing in 1988, I've become friends with a lot of country artists and a lot of writers. Well, I met Mark Chestnut. Bubba Shot the Jukebox is the one everybody knows about him. But I met Mark years and years ago. We got to be fishing buddies a little bit, had a good time. And when he come to town, I'd go see him, and I would just go wherever he was, send a note back, and say, Mark, Rev, I'm here. Sean and I are, can we come back see? And he always lets us come backstage, and we visit with him before the show and then after too. Well, at Billy Bob's, he sends me a note, says, come on back. And someone brings a note to me, and I go around to the backstage door, And I walk up and there's this guard standing there, and he's a hoss. He is a monster of a guy. And I held this out. And I said, Mark said we could come by. And he looked at me, the big guy looking down, and he crossed his arms. You're not coming in here. And I thought, hey, man, this is the note. He said it should be okay. And again, you're not coming in here. Nope, you're not going to do it. I said, if I made you mad somehow, is there a problem? And he goes, Mr. Wortham, you and I have to have a talk for a second. And I looked at him because my name was not on that note anywhere. And I looked up at him and I said, I don't know you. And he goes, yeah, you do. He says, I'm Mark. And he told me his last name. He says, and then when he did, ding, oh my God, Mark. And he goes, yeah, it's me. He said, you thought I was going to be in prison, didn't you? I said, yes, I did. And he said, well, I was on the way. He said, but when I was about 16 years old, I got into some serious trouble. Some people helped me out. I learned, they sealed my records. And he said, I'm a lawman. He said, and I can thank you and Mr. Colwell for helping turn me around, because it was you two guys that started to make a difference. I would never have known that. And I never even thought about that. But, that's one of the few times that I've been able to see where the impact of my being one of my students changed a kid's life. And that's because he was listening to me. That's the thing that I encourage everybody to do, is to talk to kids and work with them and see if you can help direct them, because we all need it at some point in our lives.
Right. Yep. And I think that's a beautiful story. Thanks for sharing it. I think it really shows that, like, you feel like sometimes you're talking to a wall, but it's not, right? It's still a person there. They may be walling you off, but they're still hearing everything. And that's going to like percolate through, at some point. At least you hope, it doesn't always work, but
Nope.
Even if it works 1 out of 100, it's worth it.
That's true.
Yeah. Very good. So I like to ask about, because Texas is one of those places that when people are from there, right, it's very distinctive. Like, I'm a Texan, right? Like you don't get it like I'm in California. Like, you get like, maybe you're like one of our our quintessential kind of like out there kind of artist or something. You might say you're Californian, but it's not like I'm from California. Most people aren't from here. They move here at some point or something, right? So what do you think it is like about Texas, specifically, that kind of engenders that that feeling? And how did like growing up there, like, and being from there, I think you said you were 5th generation earlier. How did that affect like who you are and
it's a state of mind. Being a Texan is a state of mind. People may call us arrogant, or they overbearing or whatever. But I think Texans, true Texans, are just confident. We know what we are. We know what we like. It's hard. I can't deny being a Texan. Yeah, my hat's not here, but I usually have a hat laying on top of that typewriter back there. Sure. And people hear me start talking, and they immediately know where I'm from, and that's fine. That's okay. I'll play it to the hilt. We had a 1,600 acre cattle ranch for years. I grew up on a farm. It's ingrained in me, and the Texans that I know feel the same way. That's who we are. Like it or not, we're Texans, and we're going to do what David Crockett said. Be sure you're right, and then go ahead. That's how we feel. And then I can't speak for everybody in the state, but the native Texans I know, that's how we operate, and that's how our minds work.
Yeah, very good. And then getting to the call, because actually, I like to, like, one of my favorite things actually with the show is that, like, if you go on someone's website, like, it kind of tells you so much more than like what's on there. And most of the time, like, I don't know how many people go to websites nowadays. I'm sure more people go to yours than mine, but it's always a crapshoot, right? With all the different websites and social medias and all of that. But I think it was your FAQ that you had mentioned the funny story about how you started writing columns. So I wonder if you could take us through that.
I started writing a newspaper. I've been wanting to write all my life. I was that kid with a yellow legal pad, or before yellow legal pads, they were big chief red big chief pads, or the little things that we wrote on in elementary schools. I was always wanting to write. That was my goal, was to be an author. I'm a voracious reader. If you could see, I'm going to tilt you up just a little bit. My office
that really goes up there.
Just keeps on going. And so I am a voracious reader, always have been, always will be, as long as my eyes hold out. And at the same time I was reading, I thought, I can write. I think I can do it. And I tried for years, couldn't get anything sold. And any author or any budding author understands how that is. You write your query letters and you send them out, and they get just a world of rejection before you ever make it. And I'd been trying to write novels for years and couldn't get off the ground, couldn't get them written. I'd get 50 pages into them and they'd fizzle out. And I was I was an educator. And this time of the year where we were going back to school, we'd get back to class a week before the students. We had in-service, we had meetings. And by that time, I was an administrator as the assistant director of communications for the Garland Independent School District. So I was the assistant director at that time. I was a communications specialist. And I was in one of those meetings, and I don't know if anybody's, well, I'm sure so many of you have been there. We're in a meeting that we really don't care about. It doesn't really apply to us, but we have to be there by contract. So I was sitting in the back of this huge hall listening to this meeting on technology that I had nothing to do with, but I was there. And the lady sitting next to me, my coworker, had a yellow legal pad. She was writing really fast. And I said, Mary Ellen, are you taking notes on this? She goes, oh, no. She goes, this doesn't apply to us. She goes, I'm writing a newspaper column for the Dallas Morning News. I said, well, congratulations. I didn't know you'd broken in. I'm proud for you. She goes, well, no, I haven't broken in yet. She goes, but everything I read in the newspapers is so bad, I think anybody can write. So I'm writing a newspaper. And I just had to hold my head. It doesn't work like that. It's kind of like that scam we're getting now. I don't know if you've got it, but you get the phone call, somebody's going to make your book into a movie, and it's going around for all the authors. We all get that scam. And I said, Mary Ellen, you have to go through these steps. You just don't send them a newspaper column and become a columnist like that. She goes, oh yeah, this is exactly how it's going to work. I'm going to become a writer before you did. Well, she knew I'd been trying for years, and that made me mad. I just thought, it just doesn't work like this. So I took out my own yellow legal pad, and I started writing my own newspaper column. And I'd been reading 3 different authors at that time. One of them was Robert Ruark. I don't know how many people have ever read his outdoor hunting and fishing stories. And I was reading a book by a guy named Pat McManus. And Pat's the funniest human being that ever wrote for Outdoor magazine. And he was dry as toast when you talked to him. He bloomed on the page. And then I was reading a third author. There was a mystery author, and he wrote some humor in his mysteries. And so in the middle of all that was ginning around in my head. And it just it finally came together for the first time in my writing life. An idea came together, and I wrote a newspaper column sitting there. And then I went back to the office later on and typed it up. That was how on an IBM Selectric typewriter. That was in those days. Okay. And I typed it up, and then I didn't know what to do with it. And I thought, well, she says she's going to get in the morning news, but I knew the outdoor editor for the morning news wasn't going to share his space. So I sent it to my hometown paper in Paris, Texas, where I was born, where my grandparents are from. And I just slapped a stamp on an envelope, put it in the old fashioned mail, and sent it off. 3 days later, I get a phone call from the sports editor out there. And he said, my name's Michael Condiff. I just read your column. He said, this is great. We're going to print it. And I was so excited. And I said, well, that's just wonderful. I thank you very much. And then in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, I bet Mary Ellen, and I didn't mention this, I bet her $100 I get published first. And so I'm thinking, I just made $100, Mm-hmm. And he talked to me for a little while. He goes, now here's the deal. He said, I don't want to just print one. He said, what I want to do is I want to print more by you. He said, I want to make you our outdoor humor columnist. Can you write another one for next week? I never thought about that. I had thought about writing one column. And so I went, sure, I can do that. Yeah. Okay.
Right.
And so I went home and they offered to pay me for this. That's something I hadn't even considered. You get paid as newspaper columns. So I went home or I sat down and wrote another newspaper column. And the column came out in August of 1988. It was my first newspaper column that I had published. And then Mary Ellen moved not long after that to, I think, Wisconsin, and she still owes me $100 on that bet. She never got published though, but I beat her, so I got up there before she did. But that was the electric jolt that got me into writing. Finally, got me off the dime, so that I could actually do something and get some words on paper that made sense. And after that, I mean, it's been. I still write for the Paris News. I've been writing this newspaper column for 36 years now. For self-syndicated for a number of other papers and magazines. So in fact, tomorrow is my deadline to write another one. And as I said, there've been over 2,000 of them, and they still keep going. People still keep reading them, and they have fun with them. And I've built a base with those folks that eventually wound up buying my books.
Right. Yeah, that's a really neat story. It's funny too when you hear. I had on it should probably air around now, but Sue O'Connor is the author's name. And she had talked about a teacher that told her, like, oh, I really like your writing, but too bad you can't ever do anything with it, and it kind of crushed her. Like, I think she said third grade, something like that. It kind of like crushed her spirit with it. And I was joking with her because I'm like, people would tell me things like that, but that always like made me like, so like they would tell me you shouldn't do this. And I'm like, that's the absolute thing I must do.
Exactly. Yeah. If you tell me I can't do something, well, by God, I'm going to do it. Let me tell you.
As I've gotten older, I've tried not to they told me not to stick my finger in the socket. Maybe I won't stick my finger in the socket, but.
Well, once you find out why not. And then you won't do it again after that. That's for sure.
Yeah. Amen. And God knows I've stuck my finger in a lot of sockets through the time.
Yeah, well, figuratively and literally, that's true.
And so you were an educator all of those years, and I always like to say to people that were in the service or were in education, thank you for your service. Sure. But so you did that all the years, and then you transitioned over to writing full time. What was the biggest lifestyle change with that? What's something maybe people don't anticipate would be a change? Because you hear all these writers like, I want to do it full time, right? But what was the actual process like?
Well, yeah, for me, it was different than a lot of writers because it came at a time when my first novel was printed in 2011. And that was the year I could retire after 35 years. And so I just walked off of that stage, went across the hall and walked onto another stage as a writer. So it wasn't a whole lot different. I had more time to write. When I wrote my first novel, it took me several years to get it, as most novelists do, because you're trying to figure out how to write. You're trying to find your voice, which is the hardest thing that a writer can do. Once you figure that out, then you're kind of jump started once you learn your voice. And so I had more time to write. The first novel I wrote, my first novel, The Rockle, I started writing it probably 99. It took me 4, 5, 6 years to get it written, at stoplights, the kids went to bed, lunches when I could do it. I wrote anytime I could. I finished that novel after all those years, and I typed it on an old fashioned 286 laptop, if people can remember, with a 5.5-inch floppy disk. Yeah. No one told me that 5.5-inch floppy disk would not hold all those rewrites and all that information. And I never backed it up because I didn't know that you had to. They told me that it was all there forever. I literally, and this is no joke, one night I typed the end, hit save one last time, and the computer blinked and the screen went blue. And 2 words came up, file corrupted. And it was gone. It was gone in an electronic hiccup. And I took it to a tech that said he could pull it off. And it was a 140,000 word novel. I didn't know any better at the time. I thought the thicker it was, the better book it was. 140,000 words were just gone. And so I came home and bought a new computer and a bottle of Glenlivet and drank Glenlivet, plugged the new computer in, and I had to start all over. And I typed that first line one more time, we're from up on the river. And then I had to recreate that entire novel from memory. And so that's what took so long to get it out. And then when it came out in 2011, I retired. The book came out. I was offered a movie deal that my horrible agent blew, and they withdrew the offer because she was playing games with them. But it got me to the point where I understood how to write a novel, that I knew the basics of it. And so the book came out. My publisher called. They said, well, the book's doing great. It's Kirkus said it was one of the best mystery novels of 2011. You got one just recently from Publishers Weekly, if I'm not mistaken. You got a star review of your most recent book, and so with that behind me, I'm saying I'm thinking, well, now I'm just going to write it out. This is kind of fun. And my publisher said, "Oh, Rev, we need another book." And I had not thought about that. And so I had to sit down and write the next novel and get it done in about 6 months instead of 10 years. And so that was the biggest challenge for me. And the biggest change was I'd get up in the mornings, drink coffee, and start working on my novel and play with all my imaginary friends all day long until the end of the day, And so that was the dramatic change that I had, and the realization that this is how authors that I always wanted to emulate, this is how they operate. And so that's been my life ever since.
Right. It's a great story. So you type it all out. You have 140,000 words. You lose all of that. And so you went about, did you try to kind of, you can't recreate that word for word, I'm sure, but did you try to kind of recreate it beat for beat, or did it take on any new aspects to it after that?
No, it didn't. In fact, I was surprised. I rewrote it almost verbatim. I'd been working on it for so long. I knew every chapter. I knew every character. The dialogue was real to me because a lot of the dialogue, my first novel was based on a true story. And so I had all that storyline in my head growing up. So that one, I couldn't do it today. I couldn't rewrite a novel. In fact, today I'm working on my second horror Western. And I'm not linear as I write a novel. So I kind of work on a little bit, this character, jump chapters, write an entire chapter, write the novel, and then all of a sudden this chapter finds a place and it locks in. My head doesn't work like everyone else, but I went back and reread it. I'm at 60,000 word count right now. I'm just now getting out of the second act. But I kind of lost my thread. So I went back and reread it. And I read a chapter that I had literally forgotten that I wrote. And so I could not go back and recreate that novel if I lost it at all. It would have to be completely new. So then working on that one that was so familiar to me, I was able to recreate it. And again, the second time was 140,000 words again. When I wrapped it up, typed the end, and then we sold it to Poison Pen Press, and then they came back and they're looking at me like, you're a new writer, bless your heart, you don't really know what you're doing. And my editor at the time, she goes, "This is great, we're going to publish, but we're going to make a series out of this, not just a standalone novel." She is, but here's the one thing I have to ask for you to do is go back and take out 50,000 words. And I looked at her like she was crazy. What? She goes, a novel, typical mystery novel, what the style that you're writing is about 90,000 words. You need to cut it down, cut all the fat out of it. And I said, lady, you're asking me now to delete 100,000 words because I had to rewrite this the second time, and this is going to make my head blow up. She goes, trust me, when you're finished with it, you won't notice. And, she was absolutely right. She was one of the best editors I've ever had. And she taught me so much, which she kind of felt sorry for me because I didn't know what I was doing. I kind of waded into this thing and wrote this book, and it was successful. So that that was dramatic for me. And after that, I roll out. Now I shoot for 90. Sometimes I jump over to 100, but it's usually a 90,000 word manuscript.
Right. Very good. What did that teach you then? Just about, and maybe it didn't teach you anything. Maybe you already had it in you because clearly you had the determination to push through and rewrite it. But what did it teach you just about perseverance, like in general? Well,
I'm hard headed. I don't quit. And you back me into a corner, I'm going to still come out clawing. And if you tell me I can't do something, I'm going to figure out a way to do it. So that's just something that was ingrained for me from my dad, who never quit. Dad was, World War II vet. He was over in the Pacific Theater. And the one thing he told me, and the one thing I told all my girls over and over, and I'm telling my grandkids now, you never give up. Never give up. And that goes for writing.
Right. Yeah. Amen. That's what I always think, because one of my wife used to tease me, because when we were first dating and married, I would never tell people I was a writer. And she would notice, she's like, why don't you tell them? And I was like, it was kind of twofold usually. One is half the time it's like someone like in a cab, and like they probably don't even read things, right? They're like, well, what do you write? And if you're not, Stephen King or J.K. Rowling, right, they don't really know. Right. Or it's a movie, right? Or they don't know. And then they'll inevitably tell me about the great novel that they're about to write, right? That they never end up writing, right? You just hear it, you're like, so it's like, oh, but about this novel I'm going to write, So it's a real testament to you, the fact that not only did you write that novel, that, for one, I mean, I always tell everyone on the show, because a lot of people, like yourself, that, you have great credentials, right? And I love having people that are just more starting out. And they'll be like, oh, how can I be on here, like the John Gilstraps and these people? And I'm like, you know what? You wrote a book. Like, you're a writer. Like, I'm good. Once you're doing the thing, you're a writer. Like, get rid of the imposter stuff. You're doing it. You go through the hard work. I'm with you. The success part, that's part talent. That's part luck. That's all these different, timing, everything else, right, that goes into it. But you're a writer. Just be you. But the fact that you had to do it twice, like just starting, like that is pretty amazing on your part there.
Well, thank you. It was a stumbling block, but I overcame it. I didn't give up. I just kept on. And that's why I teach writing courses too, and whole classes on. I just keep telling everybody, you can talk about it all day long, but until you start putting it on paper, then you're not an author. And then once you get it published, there you go. Now you have made it, and you can call yourself an author, and then you can go write the next one. And that's the other thing too, is once you finish that one, then you have the tools and your in your toolbox to go on and do another one, and that's what I've done. I've retired in 11, so 13 years. I've written 20 novels, 21 when I finish this one next month. And all but 2 of them are in mine. I ghost wrote a couple of novels just for the fun of it, because someone asked me to do that. I won't do it again because it irritates me to see how well it's doing, and it's not under my name. But that was another goal, something else I'd always wanted to do, and I'd wanted to try that. And it worked out for me that way. But it's pretty cool to see your name on the spine of a book on a bookcase.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's funny. It's one of those things too. It's like you have it, it's like you get it published, and that feels great for, if depending on the person. For me, it feels great for about like 30 seconds. And then I'm already like, well, what do I got to do? Like, you want to award something. It's like, oh my God. And then it's just like, oh, we just kind of feel like, okay, well, that's that, like, I had on Stephen Hunter, and he had won a Pulitzer. Right. So I asked him about it, and he's just like, I don't know that it really did anything for me. He's like, it was kind of circling. I was kind of open for it, but he's like, hey.
Well, it's Steve. He's one of those, one of those old school writers, and he's been around a long time. And and he and I shared some stories together too at conventions. And he's like that. He just goes, what? I just write it, and I hope to tell a good story. And if people like it, they like it. It's great. Yeah. If they don't, I'll write another one, and we'll go. That's like the same thing. Joel, I don't know if you know Joe R. Lansdale out of Texas. Joe's a great friend of mine, and he was another inspiration for me to get started. And Joe says, I just write for me. He says, I just write like I'm the last person in the world. I write my novel, and if people love it, that's great. But if they don't, well, then they're dead already, so it doesn't make any difference. And I'll go write another one. It's a little dark sometimes, but that way of thinking kind of helps get you all, it gets you away from the reviews and what people, what people say. I tell folks, don't take reviews to heart. If it's a bad one, it's going to make you feel bad. If it's a good one, it's going to make you feel good. But at the end, you're you, and you're still writing your novels, and you're doing the best that you can. And the sales and the success of the book is what's telling, not just the one person, whether they're professional review or just or a reviewer for Goodreads or whatever they write for. I want them to enjoy my work. But I'm not devastated if they give me 3 stars. I got a 1-star review once because the cover was torn when the lady got it when she ordered it. That says a lot about the quality of the work right there. So
yeah.
Just go on, do your job.
Yeah, exactly. I love that notion too. Is this because you hear people say, "Who's your ideal reader?" Right? And I've never had one, but I think I'm with the gentleman you mentioned. I just write. I'm writing for me most of the time, right? Or like you talked about, and I think it's very true for me is that when you kind of write from there's a place of brokenness or trauma. And I think there's a writing that comes from that. At least a good majority of my writing, I think, probably does go to that to some degree, like. Some direct, some not at all direct, but I think writing for yourself, that is all. Like for one, if you really write it for yourself, we're not all so unique. If you write that, someone else will be able to relate to your what you experienced and what you're thinking, and then it kind of does get you away because if someone else that doesn't enjoy it, well then that's fine. You can't please everyone.
I'm sorry you don't like my hair color, my mustache. That's not going to make me change. I'm just going to keep writing and do the write a good story, do the best I can on each one of them. That's my goal.
Yeah, very good, very good. So I think that's a nice transition. Then, like I told you before the show, and people have heard me say this ad nauseum on the show, with a name called Writers Drinking Whiskey, I'm ethically mandated to have some writing talk here. So I thought it'd be fun to talk a little bit. So I wanted to talk about the Western Fork because I was interested in the fact that you were starting that. But I know you also, some of it's historical fiction, right? I think it was one of them set like the 60s.
Yeah, my original series, the Rockhole series, is set in the 1960s, and it has a lot of history in there because history impacts us, and we don't realize at that point in time we're living through history, and we're going to look back on it one of these days. And so it's about it began with a story of a budding serial killer, true story in Lamar County. My granddad was a lawman. And he was chasing the clues down for this guy who was mutilating animals, and eventually turned to killing some people. And so that was the basis of The Rockhole, my first novel, and it's been very successful since it came out in 2011. And then I followed this family through the 1960s. The last book, number 9, was but let's see. Let me look. I got to get them in my head again. Laying Bones was 1968, and then 1969 was a look back at the Depression, what made some of these people what they were. So, but it's historical fiction. This new horror Western series came in the midst of COVID. It was one of the, we were locked down, which is great for a writer. I'm walking around on the keyboard, waving at the neighbors as they walk by and doing our thing. And I was in the middle of writing another series. My head was full of characters. And I went to sleep one night and dreamed an entire novel, beginning to end, characters, plot, dialogue. It was as if I'd spent the night watching a movie. And I woke up 4 a.m, which I usually don't do. I woke up with the story in my head. I came here into my office and I sat down and I wrote the first 5,000 or 6,000 words just in one long stream. And I just essentially wrote the book from the dream. It just poured out. I wrote that book in 6 weeks. but it was so odd. No one knew what to do with it. It is Western horror. It is a Texas Ranger who is ambushed by Comanches. He's tortured to death, and a curse is put on him by a Comanche shaman, because in the fight he kills the Comanche's son. And so the shaman puts a curse on him for killing him. And every morning this guy wakes up, he drops every night, and every day he wakes up and he's dead, but he's a functioning person without all of human emotion or human frailties. And from there, it gets really, really weird. Yeah, he has snake growing inside of him. He talks to reptiles. They're on the path trying to find a young lady who has a young girl's been kidnapped. Essentially, the Quanah Parker story about a young girl's kidnapped by Comanches and raised, but they're trying to find this young lady, and they run into a host of bizarre characters that you don't see in typical Westerns. And the climax takes place in a magic spring, which is called Boiling Spring, in Oklahoma. So it's a full-on old-fashioned Western with a horror aspect. So you put Dawn of the Dead and John Wayne together, or Lonesome Dove together, and that's what you're going to get out of this. And so no one knew what to do with it. And I talked to my agent. We waited a while, and then I just kind of put it on the shelf for a couple of years. And then last year, I was at the Will Rogers Medallion Awards ceremony. I won a gold medallion from this writing organization for one of my novels, for a hard country, the Texas Job. And I went to a panel, saw some editors talking. One of them mentioned that, they were looking for something, a different kind of genre. And I sat down with him and I said, all right, here you go. Here's something that might appeal to young people, might appeal to traditional folks. I've written this Western horror novel. And he looked at me like I had given him a gift. He goes, this is what we've been looking for. And so we just recently signed a contract for this new series that'll begin in 2025 with the first novel, Comancheria. And it's going to be fine. We're toying with the aspect of releasing it at the same time as a graphic novel. We're reaching out to younger readers, but more traditional readers too, that like a Western, that like humor, and that like something a little bit different. And not a lot of people doing that. There are a few novels out there, but not a lot of them. And again, going back, Joe R. Lansdale, my buddy Joe Lansdale, he's written a couple that are similar to this. And when I told him about it, man, he was excited because he knew that he was an inspiration to me when I first started. I reached out to Lansdale way back in like 2005 or 4 when I was getting ready to just quit. I was done. Rejection notices had stacked up. And I cold called him back in the old days when you looked up a phone number on, call information, Nacogdoches, Texas. And I said, can you give me Joe Lansdale's number? And he answered the phone. And I said, you don't know me from Adam. I said, I've been reading you for the last 10 years. And I told him where I was and what I was doing. And he spent half an hour on the phone talking me out of quitting. And, and I said, I don't ever quit. But I was just that close. And Joe talked me into it, and he said, you'll make it one of these days. And then when my second novel, Burroughs, came out, which is Stephen King meets Harper Lee, I said it to him, and he was ecstatic over there. He goes, now, he said, you found your stride. So he's excited about this Western series also.
Yeah, I believe it. That's really fun. I mean, you explained it there, so I won't ask it. But what I was curious about is that you get, I don't always love the term genres, right? But categories, right? Like it makes sense where you kind of put something on the bookshelf. But then it's always interesting to see where do those kind of subgenres, or when something becomes its own kind of new genre, where it comes from. So it's cool. It just came to you in a dream, and you went from there. So
I grabbed where the opportunity arose, and I never wanted to be a mystery writer. I never wanted to be a thriller writer. I want to do what I want to do. And so I've written mysteries, written thrillers, written Westerns, now horror Western. And I've got what I'm calling a buddy book I'm putting together right now. Fits no genre. It's just a novel about two young men in 1971 who, on their senior trip, are driving out to Prescott, Arizona, to meet Steve McQueen, who's making a movie called Junior Bonner, which was an influential movie for me. And these two guys are going to go out there and meet Sam Peckinpah, the director, and meet Steve McQueen and be in a movie. That fits nothing that I've ever done before, but I just want to do something different and fun there too. I tell all when I'm teaching classes, I just tell them, write the book. Quit pulling your hair and rending your clothes, and the old fashioned, you got to bleed on the keyboard, get some drops out there, get the blood on the keyboard. No, just write the book. Write the damn book, and then you'll be able to sell it and get it published, and then go on to the next one.
Amen. I love the notion of that too. Because one of the things that I thought about with this show, but then also just my own career here, is that I hate the pigeonholing. Right, it's like now, like it used to be, like you'd go see a Steven Spielberg film. They weren't all E.T. or something, right? You would do lots of different ones. So it used to be like you're a storyteller. Right. And it's kind of fun to go see what that storyteller is going to do in this new, area, or just what strip the genre out of it. Just what story are they telling?
Yeah, tell me a good story. Yeah,
right.
That's what I want. I want to be engaged. That's exactly right.
Yeah. So that's why I was like, too. I'm like, oh man, I don't want to okay, now I'm a thriller writer. Now I'm this. I'm like, I'm going to write this, and or the dreaded literary fiction, which is where lots of mine falls into that, I guess. But I'm like, I don't want to be like, I don't want any pigeonhole. I want to just go tell the stories that I want to tell and try to make them as good as you can.
And then that's it. I just want to write a book and want to entertain. We're in the entertainment business. We entertain folks. We're not actors. Of course, I dabbled my toe in it a few years ago. I was an extra on 1883, and so I wanted to see how movies were filmed, and I got into the opening sequence where they filmed it in Fort Worth, and I got behind the scenes and saw Taylor Sheridan work and saw how the sausage is made, as they say. And that's not a world I want to live in or work in. I found that out really quick. 2 days was enough for me. But it was an experience. It was fun, and that's what being a writer does. It leads you into different things, and it lets you experience different aspects of life or different careers, and then you plug that into your books. The one that we were just talking about, the Tucker Snow series, that came about after I met two former undercover narcotics agents they've become very good friends of mine now. And I learned their stories, and I thought, this would be kind of fun. Let me take these guys, make them into characters. I change it up a little bit. They are now the main character, Tucker Snow, is a brand inspector. And if anyone's never been around cattle or farms or ranches, there are people that they're the cattle cops. That's what they do. Is they work rural farm and ranch crimes. And so my character, Tucker Snow, is a brand inspector, and he's pulled into two or three different worlds that most people don't know about. So I'm exploring that for a little while, and these guys that live different lives that work. These two were truly unique. They work together undercover from the DPS, the Department of Public Safety here in Texas. Now, under special dispensation from the governor of Texas at the time, who allowed two brothers to work undercover narcotics together. They were a team that cut a swath across this state. And everybody that I talk to that's from around in here, when I mention the Easterwood brothers, they go, "Oh man, I've heard of them. I know them, or I worked with those guys, or those guys are nuts, but man, they did a great job." So it allows me to explore that world and get to know these guys and make new friends and write stories, not of what they actually did, though some of their stories that Gilstrap and I heard around a campfire drinking whiskey one night. They made their way into the first novel. Now that I've gotten to know the guys, they tell me about some other crimes that they've solved or some other things that they were involved in. Those made their way into the novels too, especially the new one that's coming out, The Broken Truth. So, you just take, you just, somebody asked Willie Nelson one time, they said, Willie, where do you get all these songs? Where do you get the ideas for the songs? And Willie said, they're all around us. I just reach out and grab them out of the air and put them together. And that's what I've done with the characters and the people that I've met. I meet the people, I hear their stories, I see the world, and then I just pull all the components in, pull them out of the air, and put them together, and I create a novel out of it. It's not a novel that's plotted. I don't outline. I don't plot. I despise the word pantser, but that's the word everybody uses for us that people that don't plot. I just put my fingers on the keyboard and start typing, and it's as if you are typing it up and it comes up in front of me on the screen. I watch the story unfold, and I'm as surprised at the end as everyone else.
Yeah, very good. Well, I like what you said earlier, because I tend to do the same, but I think we might be in the minority as you're kind of starting here, and then, I'm 4 chapters off. I'm writing this because this is here in my head. I have to put this down. So, and then after you kind of get it together, then you go through and
you clean it up afterwards.
Yeah.
Oh, my characters take off. I have no control over my characters at all. They do things that I don't. My wife just kind of rolls her eyes when I tell her, but it's the truth. My characters lead me off into places I don't know. I don't expect. Things happen. They say things that lead to other things, and I have no control over them. I just sit out here and drink whiskey and let them tell the story, and it pops up on the screen. That's about the way it works out for me.
Very good. Very good. So thank you for that. So we have a special portion of the show that I like to call shots.
Okay.
So you can do shots or not, but so rapid fire questions. You don't have to give you can give whatever response you want, but we'll go through. So you ready?
Okay, go ahead.
All right. So there's a saying that everything's bigger in Texas. So let's test the premise here. So you can choose Texas for these answers, or you can just choose other. You don't have to have the exact right answer. So we're gonna grill you here on sizes. So largest state in the United States.
Oh, that's Alaska.
You nailed it. I butchered that one time when I was in high school, and we could not figure it out. I saw an interesting map one time where they took Alaska and put it over the continental U.S. And it is damn near as big just as the continental U.S. Like
I've been there, and I've been there twice and seen just a tiny part of that. I've told my wife I want to go back here pretty soon. I need to go back up there and fish and do some hiking. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I know. That's one of my dreams is to get up to Alaska. I haven't done it yet, but it's definitely on there. Largest stadium by capacity in the U.S.
Okay, now you're asking sports questions, and that this is a guy that has no use for competitive sports whatsoever. So I couldn't even venture a guess at the largest capacity. I honestly can't.
Is Texas or other? You can pick the other, or it's in Texas.
I'll be here in Texas then. Yeah. I guess that's Texas.
Oh, it's actually Michigan, the stadium, and for the college football team. I guess they've and that's all these are just per the interweb. I did a lot of deep research. I think it holds 107,601 people.
I do know that they've expanded Texas A&M football stadium, and it's much bigger, but I couldn't even begin to tell you the capacity of that.
Right. Yeah. And maybe that was after, the whatever internet site that told me this information. State that produces the most oil.
I'd say Texas.
You're right. You would be right. 2 billion barrels a year from Texas.
That's a note that the new book that is coming out next month, The Broken Truth, is about the oil industry and the impact that petroleum has on the world. And some of my characters are talking about our whole world is built on petroleum products, and people don't realize that. And so that's it. The first novel, the Hard Country, is about how your partially is about how your car is listening to you, and about how your phone downloads all your information into cars, and people are tracking us. So just a little note about the Tucker Snow books.
Right, very good. Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting about oil too, because I've told my daughters too when they're like, "Oh, oil." But it's like, we wouldn't have sterile medical devices without oil, because that makes the plastic that makes it possible to sterilize these devices and send them everywhere. Glasses, I don't wear on the show, but I wear all day when I'm writing. So much goes into it.
We don't eat without oil. It's the farmers run on diesel. And a lot of the stuff that's made, everything that's made that they use is touched by petroleum products in some way. We can't get away from it. We just have to figure out different ways to use it, and then maybe use it better.
Right. Yeah. Amen. So the state with the most UFO sightings.
That'd be a tough one. Just because we're so big, I'd say Texas. Yeah, I'll have to go with Texas.
Yeah, so it's California. And It's more than double than any other state. Texas didn't make the top 10.
Well, you guys spent a lot of time looking up. Maybe that's what it is.
We do a lot of drugs in California. There might be some UFOs out there too, but there's also just a lot of things you see when you look up when you're high on all of the drugs we're doing. So awesome. So moving away from the Texas. So what's the best piece of advice you ever received?
The best piece of advice I ever received: keep your mouth shut and listen. That's probably the best one, and it has served me well over the years.
Amen. Thank you. What's the worst piece of advice you ever received?
Wow. The worst piece of advice. I don't know. There have been some bad ones. I can't nail it down, to be honest. No, if I had to say anything, it'd be too personal, and I'd probably get in trouble with somebody. Well, I like to pass on that one.
Fair enough. The man makes the mustache, or the stash makes the man.
Oh, you know what? Yeah. I met Sam Elliott when I was on the set of 1883, and he kind of looked at me, and I looked at him. He ducked his head. Nice mustache. Well, thank you. Yours isn't bad either. But, we grow up. I don't know if we hide behind them or not. They attract a lot of attention. But I grew mine way back in probably 80 or 81, and then grew the handlebars about 90. No, I grew those bad. There's a picture of me with my daughter when she was first born, and that was about 87 or 88. So, yeah, I don't know if it makes anything or not, but it gives me a place to hide if I need to.
Very good. What's the strangest thing you've ever encountered / witnessed?
Well, and people are going to think I'm on those drugs you were talking about. And I probably think that the whiskey's starting to affect me. But I have seen a ghost. In fact, the house we lived in before we moved here had a ghost that we called Casper. And he became so familiar that we kind of joked about him. I would see him out of the corner of my eyes. One night, my wife and I were watching TV, and a bell rang right behind our heads, as if somebody was behind it with ding, ding, ding. That close. And nothing was back there. No electronics. It was just, we called him Casper. It was Casper. And so, yeah, that's probably the weirdest thing that people would think I'm nuts. And then when I tell people that I have a ghost in the house, they kind of look at me, how much have you had to drink? Well, usually not enough, but we had a ghost in the house, and he did not follow us over here. We have not had any of those sightings or little funny things since we moved over here into this about 4 years ago.
Very good. No, thanks for that. I always like to ask the question because I'm like, maybe I'm doing too much of the California drugs, but I've had whole shows. I don't know if it shows on the camera right now. Actually, here, I can show this on the camera, but I had a guy that studies Bigfoot on the show.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
The famous Patterson footage kind of Bigfoot there, but UFOs, whatever. I'm so weird. My wife's always like, I always have some random bit of information. Because I'm not a jack of all trades, because you can't even give me the jack, but I know little bits of all kinds of stuff because I'm just so curious about everything all of the time. So like military tech, she's like, where do you know this? I'm like, I don't know. I just look things up.
It just stuck in my head and probably pushed some good information out of the way to stick into my head. Yeah, something that probably make money on you, but just another way.
Very good. And so final question for our shots portion here. Favorite podcast, and why is it Writers Drinking Whiskey?
Well, it is now. Writers were drinking whiskey because it's so much fun. Yeah, I don't listen to podcasts as a rule. So if I'm on, or if a friend Gilstrap has a podcast that I've looked at, and so those are the favorites for me. But as a rule, I don't watch a whole lot of them. But this one's definitely is on my radar now, and so I'm going to be tuning in every chance I get, because I love to hear writers talk about writing. And that's the reason I love to go to writers conferences. I mean, we're going to be at BoucherCon in Nashville next month. I'm on a couple of panels. I don't go to take notes or anything, because I've got my mind on the track I want it. But I do go to hang out with authors and to meet new ones, reconnect with old author friends, and just have a good time. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, very good, very good. That was awesome. I'll put a link for what was it called? BoucherCon?
BoucherCon. Yep. Yeah, it's in Nashville. Yeah, at the Grand Ole Opry Hotel.
Oh, very cool. I'll have to check that out one year. My nephew just moved out. He's in the Nashville PD.
Oh, nice.
So he just moved out from Palmdale, California. Maybe 6 months ago now.
Well, come by and look us up. John and I'll be there.
All right, yeah, well, that's tell him, yeah. But it would be a good excuse for me to go out. I can do the conference, go hang out with my nephew, and Nashville's awesome. I love it.
It moves around every year. This next year's going to be, I think, in New Orleans. It's the biggest writers conference in the country, though. Hundreds of people attend, thousands of people attend, hundreds of authors, and that's why I tell budding writers. I didn't know about conferences when I was trying to learn this business. Had I known, I probably would have got my first book out, sooner. But you can get out and you can meet the people that you read. You can learn from the people that have done the same things, that made the mistakes that I've had, and I might not have had to make them. So writers' conferences are good for anyone that's looking into getting into this career.
Right, sure. Amen for that. Awesome. So thanks for that. I think that is I like that. That's always the last question. So, it's self-serving, and after the day,
it works. It works. I can dig it.
So awesome. So then maybe we can transition then over to the reading. Did you have something you can read for us today?
Yeah, I don't know how long you want me to go, but and I don't like reading my own stuff. I got to put my glasses on because I'm like you, I can't see without them. But this is, let me find it here. This is from Hard Country. And in it, a little setup so I don't have to read a lot of it. Tucker Snow is he lost his wife and his daughter to essentially a drunk driver, someone on drugs that ran into the car and killed him. And he's dealing with his wife's issue. They moved in to, let me tell, like, they move into a house in the country, and this is based on a true story. We had a ranch house in Oklahoma. We bought the ranch, family ranch, not realizing that across the gravel road and about 200 yards away, there was a meth house, a buy house. We had people running up and down, druggies all the time. We didn't know when we bought the place. And I had the police officers and a former Secret Service agent spend the night out there one night. And they said, you realize that, these people are coming out and buying drugs all night long. And we suspected that, but I'm not a cop. I didn't really understand what was going on, but I did once they cleared it up for me. And then those people attracted more criminals. And in their mindset, the way these people operate, they decided, well, we need to break into the house across the street and steal some things so that we could sell them to make more drug money. Well, they broke into the ranch house more than once. Just kicked the door in. I replaced the doors twice over there, and they stole our truck, my brother-in-law's ranch truck. Tried to drive it through a pipe gate to get it out. Now, if you don't know what a pipe gate is, if you're not from the country, it is one of the toughest gates. It's a security gate. And they realized they could not drive this truck through the pipe gate to escape and to take it away. So they went through the pasture and drove it through a barbed wire fence, and then drove over to the buy house to trade what they stole out of the house for some more drugs. So this is what we were dealing with at the ranch up in Oklahoma. And I based part of Hard Country on it because we lived it. We had to deal with these people, and we deal with the theft of the truck and the drugs. And so I put Tucker Snow and his surviving daughter in this new house they just bought out in the country, and they're trying to get away from all the death of his wife and the heartbreak, and to start a new job. Well, Tucker gets crossways with the people that own the house. Just having words with him. He went over there to check on some gunfire one day because it didn't sound like country. There's country gunfire, and then there's violent gunfire. This sounded like a shootout. So he goes over to check it out. They realize that he's the law, and they want to run him off out of the house. So they send in somebody to break into the house and essentially burn it down. So I'm going to go through this. I hope it's not too long. And if it is, you can just edit all you want to, because you are the editor. And Tucker says, clearing a house was one of my least favorite things to do, especially with my daughter there. Gently closing the door behind me, I held the pistol at high ready, the natural and familiar way I'd learned to carry it in such circumstances. It took another 5 minutes to check the rest of the second floor, and I felt better to know that she and I were alone up there. Maybe there was no one at all, and I'd worked myself up for no reason, but experience weighed heavily on my mind. I'd seen too many instances of break-in enterings going bad, resulting in injury or death. Night weighs heavy on people, and oftentimes we experience more dread or danger in the darkness than in the day. We've all been awakened in the night by some sound, and more than once laid in bed, imaginations running wild. It could have been my subconscious, but my wife Sarah Beth's voice told me it was real. Check on Chloe, she said in my mind. Something was threatening her, and I wasn't going to allow anything to happen to us. I paused at the head of the stairs for a moment, and I swore I saw a shadow pass at the bottom from left to right on the first floor, but it could have been my imagination. I had to make the rounds down there too. Descending stairs is a little safer than going the other way. There are shooting galleries for anyone waiting at the top, but going down, the higher position gave me a clear view of the dim hall and the doorways below. Halfway down, I paused. Instead of peering directly into the darker shadows where someone might hide, I looked slightly off to the left. Used to the darkness, and because I hadn't turned on any lights, my night vision was intact. It was wise to move slowly, listening to every 2 or 3 steps. I wanted to think someone was there, but there was no concrete evidence one way or the other yet. Straight ahead was the front door, still locked. Turning back to the interior, I had a living area on the right and a formal dining room turned office on the left. I chose to clear the living room first, and it was empty. When I crossed back to the office, the hair on the back of my neck prickled, and the sixth sense of unseen danger that came from our ancestors who fearfully squatted in caves in the darkness. Something wasn't right. It was then I caught the strong odor of cigarette smoke, like the scent that emanates from the bodies and clothing of heavy smokers. My senses heightened, and that warning jangled in the back of my mind. It went into overdrive. I worked through the office and into the kitchen. Still no one, but the lingering smell wasn't my imagination. Something toxic in more ways than one had been in the house. The back door was unlocked, and I knew I'd turned the deadbolt when I came in for the night. Twisted tight as a clock spring, I made a second round to the ground floor, double-checking that the windows were locked and making sure no one was in the closets or even in the cabinets. The cigarette odor was stronger in the kitchen, and I figured that's where the intruder spent most of his time for whatever reason. I wondered why. With the whole house wide open to investigate, what was the guy after? I can keep on going for a while, but he clears the house and then finds that the intruder had been in his daughter's bathroom hiding all the time, and neither of them knew. And that's a horror that a parent would have, that somebody's in the house with your child. I don't hear you any longer.
I mute it when people are reading so that, my dogs or me don't disrupt it. And because I'm such a pro at this, I inevitably forget every time to unmute.
That's all right. That's all right. You don't mind if I have another, do you?
Not at all. Have as much as you like. But no, I was just saying that's one of those things. Like my wife always checks now. I always have checked. It's always been kind of a thing. But part of the reason I love having dogs around, because they drive me like slightly insane. But I actually trust the dogs more than I do alarm systems and things, because I'm like, hey, you can shut power off, turn the internet off and get the alarm system. But, my dogs aren't going to actually protect us because they're 2 chocolate labs. They're going to lick whoever comes in. But before you come in, they're going to be barking and like going nuts. Like, what's happening? Are you coming in? What's happening? It's going to at least alert me, to what's happening. So.
Well, that's true. Yeah, and I have been friends and run with cops all my life. I work very closely with them as the crisis manager for the Garland ISD, and I knew a man who it was a horrible experience. They left the garage door open just enough one night for someone to roll underneath the garage and break into the house, raped his wife, stole in front of him, and took all the money and beat him up, left them both tied up for dead. And, when you hear those stories, then you go back around, you check everything else every night. Once again, we have a routine down here to button the house up at night because I know all the cops. And a lot of the things that happen in my books, like and this is Hard Country that I just read out of. A lot of the things that happen in my books come from real life, from the stories that cops tell me, or that I have been a part of, and so I weave those into into my novels to give them that sense of reality too.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for that. It's funny, as you're saying, enough of my dogs are growling at each other, or like they're looking out the dog door right now, but they hang out. So the way the bar is located here, just on the other side, is where everyone would kind of sit and hang out. But then my writing desk is like clear right there. And so then the doggy door is next to it. So they hang out with me all day, like in here. But now I just hear them over there as you're saying all that. Like, oh, I've heard danger. I've heard danger.
Let's make Dad think something's happening.
Very good. So I did want to. So if people want to learn more about you, I have the website already, set up to link onto with the show description and things here. But is there anywhere else they should go?
Yeah. Go to the website. But I have two Facebook accounts because I didn't know what I was doing when I set them all up. And as an author, you learn things. So I set up my what should have been a personal Facebook account, and that's Reavis Wortham, just Reavis Wortham. And most of my activity takes place on that page. And we talk about books, we talk about life and family. I do what I call an old-timey word of the day. Quite often, just old words that we grew up with. We don't know where they came from. Old Texas words. We were talking about Texas earlier. We call barbed wire here barbed wire, and so we discuss the pronunciation, the origins of barbed wire. We talk about a certain shovel. There, in some places, some parts of the country, they call it a sharpshooter. We grew up calling it a bill dookie. I don't know where the name came from. Nobody I can find can come from it. Sure. But if I tell people that I know, hand me a bill dookie shovel, they will hand me a sharpshooter. Just the things that are the regional or Texas. We talk about a lot of that. Old phrases that people use, and then we talk about the old, what my daughters call the olden days, the 70s, the 60s, and the things that we dealt with, and the fun things that we did. So I have a lot. My Facebook page is not designed just to sell books; it's designed to have fun. We don't discuss or argue politics on there, so that you can come on there and you can talk about anything you want. We do. We have a lot of fun. We do talk about books. When I announce signing signings or release books or information that I think people might be interested in. So we do that. My other page is Reavis Wortham. That's the author page. Please go like that, folks. If just do crank up the numbers on that so that more people can see. If you like it, other people can see it. But go join me on my Reavis Wortham. I do a little Instagram, not a lot. I don't do Twitter. Don't understand Twitter. People go fight. I don't want to do that. So I'm not too old to fight anymore. So those are the places you can find me. And then read the books if you have the opportunity. If I have written or if I've touched on anything that you find interesting, join me on those books and we'll talk about them at some point. I'm always open to emails. You can email me through my website, Reavis, www.reaviswortham.com or reaviswortham.com. I'm on both domains so I can get you. But just come on over and have fun and hopefully enjoy the things that I write.
Right. Amen. I love that about it too, because I've said it on the show before, but I try to keep the show not political because there's so many places. I think there's too many places. I don't know why, we've suddenly, I feel like the last 15 years or so decided everything has to be political all of the time. And I'm I don't want to talk about it all the time. And I don't think it's healthy to talk about it all the time.
No, people get mad these days and you can't change anyone's mind. They're going to make it up on their own for the most part. But, I was really disappointed when I first found out about Facebook and I got into it. I didn't want to get into it, but it's part of my contract, just to promote. And I saw Facebook at the outset as a different incarnation of where I grew up. We had a little country store back when I was a kid. It was a chain. It was opened by a local guy. You could buy bread and vegetables or canned goods or whatever, or hats or saddles or anything else. It was in there. But the old men, which were younger than I am today, the old men would sit up there in front of that porch, on the porch and shade on benches and chairs. And they would talk about life and they would tell stories. And they might touch on politics a little bit, but mostly it was just a bunch. It was a way for people to gather together, to talk, and to get and to share stories and ideas. And I thought this is what Facebook should have been. It should have been that, and I'm sure every now and then a couple of guys probably squaring off over something up at the store at one time. But I had hoped Facebook would be that old country store and a new format that you could just go visit and tell stories and laugh and discuss the weather, whatever it is that old people did back then. But it's not that anymore. Facebook is disappointed. It's dissolved into a fight, and I have better things to do than to argue politics or religion or anything else with anybody. I just want to get up in the mornings and have a great day and love the family and love my friends. They go to bed at night, get up next morning, do it all over again.
Right. Yeah. Amen. I know it's, I try to tell my kids that too. It's like, you can choose joy, we choose misery so often, there's times, they're going to be bad, but for the most part, most days you can wake up and choose to live that with joy, live that with, happiness. So
I had a friend that passed away several years ago. He had horrible diabetes. They replaced, he had cornea transplant, heart transplant, kidney transplants, he'd lost both legs. He was a miracle man, but throughout all that, he had a favorite song that he would play, and it was "Don't Worry, Be Happy." And that was his attitude. No matter how miserable he was, it was "Don't Worry, Be Happy," and he'd play that song in the radio. He had back then it was on a CD. You didn't go anywhere without hearing that from him. And he chose to be happy. He chose to deal with it, and instead of being miserable, he enjoyed every day that he had. He was lucky to have it, as we all are.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that actually is a great point. Then I always like to call it last call. You don't have to go, but you'll have to restart the video. So I always like to ask everyone the final question, which is just, what is one thing that that we could impart upon the audience here that they could do just to make their lives a little bit better?
And that was it. Just be happy. Good. Don't find misery. Don't find the low places in life. Don't complain. Enjoy what you've got. Enjoy your kids. Enjoy your life. It's so fleeting and so short. And those of you that have children, we're all working. We work so hard as young people to raise a family and to make money. And I look back now and I see the times that I didn't get to do stuff with my children, or I don't remember certain things about it, about their growing up. And we're lucky. We shot a lot of film, a lot of videos, so we can go back and look at that. But I wasn't always in the moment. And I tell this for parents, put down that damn cell phone and look at your children and play with your children and watch them when they say, watch me, and be engaged, because one day you're going to look up and they're going to be grown and gone. And those little people that you love so much are not going to be around anymore. And put the phones down.
Right. Yeah. Amen. I think that too. I tried to tell my daughters that when they have the grandkids, is that you don't realize that being a parent is almost a process of losing the person you love most in the world. Exactly. And gaining like a new one, but they're just from a baby to a toddler to a kid to a teen, preteen, teen. It's that you change so much that you really got to enjoy that person while they're there. And we were lucky enough. I had the first two when I was pretty young. I was 20 when I had my oldest daughter, Rhiannon, 21 when I had Cassidy. And then years later, my wife and I got married. She had a daughter that was, I think, 2 at the time, if I remember right, Michaela. And then we had our son, William, because my family's really creative with names. So I'm the 7th William, and my son's the 8th. And I think you go back to Ireland. I think my mom traced it back to, there's a William Hennessy in Ireland, and they came over and somehow that became Hincy. But you with my son, because it was 12 years after Rhiannon was born, it's like I really knew, like, oh, I really want to like cherish this time. Because you like you said, you're so busy. You're trying to, like, especially starting off, trying to keep a roof over everyone's head, keep everyone fed, and then so by the time he came around, it was like, no, I really want to cherish this, because I know I'm not getting this again. Yeah,
they change. Little people change every day. I have 2 daughters, Meg and Chelsea. They're both educators, and Meg has 3, Chelsea has 2. Meg has the baby boy, the last grandchild that we're going to have. And he's 3 now, and he still climbs up in my lap, but it's not going to be much longer. He won't, and he's my little buddy. Of all of them, he's the one that comes to me as soon as he comes through the door. And so, one of these days, he's not going to want to climb up in my lap anymore. And he's not going to want to sit with me and touch my face with his little hands. That's not going to happen any longer. And parents need to realize that. And my grandmother told me one time to pay attention. And so I made a conscious effort to do that, but not enough. I didn't listen to her well enough. I wish I had.
Right. Amen. Awesome. Well, thanks for that. It was, a true honor, having you on. Thanks so much for coming and spending the time and having a few drinks. And cheers to you, sir.
Well, cheers to you, and thank you so much for the invitation. I had a ball today. I hope we didn't bore anybody with all the long stories. And if I've touched you with any of the stories or any of my books, please let me know. I love feedback from everybody, and thank you so much. It's an honor to be on here, and for your courtesy to invite me. It's been a great time.
Extra shots. Question for the audience: what is the best place to get a drink where you're from? Let us know in that comment section down below. I would love to know, because I'm always looking for places to go, and I like to travel. So let us know what city you're talking about, where the place is. We'll give them some free publicity, and I will gladly pay for drinks when I'm there. And I hope everyone gladly pays for their drinks, because otherwise it would be stealing. As always, so the very best way, if you want to support the show, is pick up a book. So he mentioned a ton of his. Of course, I would appreciate it if you would check out mine, whatever your heart's content with. Thanks so much again for all your support. You have a great day, and cheers, everybody.